Thank you for having me.
If you can introduce yourself a little bit about where you're coming from and all about what you do, etc.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, my name is Adrian Norman, everyone. I have always loved music, and I learned to DJ at a very young age and sort of go clubbing from the age of 16, much to my parents' despair. I then took a corporate job, and I'm originally from Guernsey in the Channel Islands, so a small island where there weren't many opportunities. So I moved to London 11 years ago with my work, and kind of caught up with friends that had done sort of well in the electronic space, and kind of just realized how many opportunities were in London, how many events you can go to every night of the week, and sort of, reignited my passion. So started managing some friends, actually, probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And then about 5 years ago, sort of took it seriously, really, as a part-time, as well as obviously the corporate job paid the bills. And then sort of took on the management company, set it all up, and sort of working with the artists. And then I actually left the corporate job last September. So I've been a year with no income, but sort of loving it. And yeah, I mean, management from my perspective, obviously, when you sort of look at the music industry and the PR and the different bits, management's my favorite part, just because obviously, I guess, coming from a corporate world, you sort of, each artist is a business, but also I think it's watching the journey and looking at the whole picture of, I get bored quite easily. So sort of, loads of different things going on and learning all the time is really interesting for me. So I have a really great roster of artists. I have an electronic artist, Thomas Irwin, who we've been working with a couple of years now. He's up and coming, he's 22. He's got a bit of interest from the likes of Insanity since 93 at the moment. So we're just sort of working with him. He's a bit of an introvert, so getting him to use social media and all this stuff has been sort of an ongoing journey, but now he's sort of smashing it. And then I have an R&B artist, Ros Queen. So she's very cool, got a great voice. She's from Birmingham, relocated to London. So she has a big Brummie accent and a big personality. We have an acoustic guy, Max, who again is great live, I guess, and then I've got a band, an indie band, Blue Polo, who just played festival the other week in Shropshire. And I think, again, for me, setting up is I love all sorts of music. So I love every genre of music. So for me, it was important not just to have 4 electronic artists where they're all trying to do the same thing. Having a sort of roster which sort of represented my taste in music and what I enjoy was really important as well.
Crazy. So take us on how would you define what a music manager's job is? And like, what's your day-to-day kind of job?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I do every day is chase them on any outstanding items. Yeah, I think it's really about making sure that we know where they are. We know sort of the most pressing things. Again, for me, the most important thing is the assets. The more assets they give me, the more sound, the more music we have, the more I can do for them. So again, it's really making sure that they are working on their demos, make sure that they're constantly getting their social content out there, and on the DJ space, making sure that they are sort of using SoundCloud and all the platforms available to them. So I guess it's really just making sure that pipeline of work and content is there. Because, as I say, the more they're out there in the world, the more they're visible, the more I can then constantly reach out to any A&R contacts we have, or the more you can sort of constantly PR them. So I guess it's really touching with them, not too much, obviously. I mean, WhatsApp is obviously, I think, WhatsApp is a great thing, but I think one of the downfalls or pitfalls of WhatsApp is instant. And sometimes there's a lot too much done on WhatsApp. It's easier to pick up the phone. And I also think people have got too used to using WhatsApp as well, just to sign agreements, and obviously you need that by email because it wouldn't stand up in a court of law. So I think it's really sort of making sure we know where they are, and making sure they're happy, and just identifying any problems. So day to day I kind of always just as I say, just see what's going on with the world, really, and then on the side of that, whilst they're all sort of working on providing with what I need, it's really networking, keeping on top of latest tech, making sure that we sort of still have all our A&R and PR staff in place, and just sort of networking. I think it's all about, I think this is why initiatives like this are great, because it really is about community and what you learn through these things as well, and who you meet.
Amazing. So for you, what is networking like as a manager? Because it's a bit do you think there's a difference between being an artist and being a manager in the networking world?
Yeah, I do. Do you know what? I think it's, again, one of the things that I do try and do is get collaborations with some of the artists. However, I think it's a lot easier for artists to try and find collaborations with artists, by reaching out to them on Instagram, by reaching out to them at gigs, or, For example, Blue Polar and Thomas and Ross Green, they'll always be messaging people on Insta, following them, and they get more results that way. I think sometimes when you kind of say to another artist, oh, here's my manager, it might, I don't know if it's a bit frightening or a bit off-putting. But I think really for artists to collaborate with artists is the best way. I think for managers, when it comes to networking, it's kind of great to meet artists, and especially because you never know when you might remember their name to get them for a live gig or to introduce them to someone. And I think it's important for managers to be helpful. Fair enough, obviously you're looking after your own roster, but you're not trying to rewrite the book, right? It's your artists which have got the creativity. I think it's important for managers just to help out and sort of share their knowledge and share their wealth. And so for me, but when it comes to the managers networking, whilst it's great to sort of network with artists, I think the managers have a responsibility to really keep abreast of everything that's going on and feedback that knowledge. Feedback what labels are looking for, feedback the current trends, feedback what's kind of the new hashtags on TikTok and all that sort of stuff, which is invaluable. Which let's be honest, when artists a lot of the time don't have a team, a manager isn't there to be all the team, but at least they can really feedback the important bits, because as well as the artist does, you're going to do well as well, right? It's a win-win, and it's a partnership. I think in management, it's easy to sort of say, you kind of hate saying that artists are a business because it makes you feel like there's something that actually it's truly a partnership in a way.
And so I believe we have a lot of artists right now. So if you were to give us some advice as in how to find a manager and what to look into when finding a manager, what would you say?
So I think there is really deciding whether you're ready for a manager. I think you've got to kind of look at it and think, do I have enough material? Is my material where it should be? And what am I struggling with and what am I not struggling with? I think then if you don't forget that a lot of managers will want you to sign an agreement straight away. There is the fact that they're going to look at probably 20 to 25% management fee on everything straight away. So I would look at whether you actually really need one, and if you do really need one, you think you need one. Well, look, there are managers out there that aren't going to be a lot fairer. I think again, one of the important things is not to sign an agreement straight away, because I do think that you need to vibe with that person, and I think you should work with them for a few weeks and up to a couple of months to see whether you're going to get on. Once you've signed on that paper, you're kind of stuck to it for a while, right? So I think I would say decide if you need one. Then if you are going to explore it and speak to a few people and see if what they're saying makes sense and if you've heard it from elsewhere. And I think, again, if you've heard from your network various things, check out what they're saying compared to the network. Don't pay money up front. There are still people that would want you to pay a retainer, and don't do any of that. I think don't forget that there's a clause in management agreements called a sunset clause, whereby managers will still make money off you even if you leave them, and so that's where they make their money back. So if they're taking you on as an independent artist, they will recoup their money somewhere, so you don't need to be giving them any money up front or any of that sort of retainer stuff, and I think that's what a lot of artists forget. And then I think if you do sort of want them, I guess it's really a case of maybe looking at some of the smaller management companies. MMF, the Music Managers Forum, has a sort of a table, sort of notice board for artists seeking management, sort of reaching out. And I think there's like the Unsigned Guide in the UK, which sort of tells you some managers and stuff as well. So I think it's really sort of looking at some of your peers, in that space. If you have an artist you're collaborating with other friends and they've got people, then just sort of look at who they're working with, and maybe they want to reach out as well. I do think it's tough sometimes for managers because a lot of people do want artists. So I think, again, it's where building a relationship with them, as you see, if you both grow, they might not have, space on the roster now, but as they see you do better, they might want to just give you free advice. And then in a year's time, maybe you'll start working together. So I think it's, deciding whether you do, then sort of really sort of, making sure you check out the person you are. And, it becomes a friendship and a partnership, right? So make sure that they're saying the things you want and they've got the same ethos and ethics and morals and sort of all that stuff and the same outlook as you. They need to not just see you as an asset or sort of a product. They do need to see you as someone they want to, really work with and really push and really help as well.
Right. So in terms of contract, how long do you ask the artist to sign contract for?
So I actually, when I start working, I don't ask. And look, I think probably everyone's a bit different, but for me, I would say, work with someone for 2 or 3 months before you sign an agreement, just because 2 or 3 months is a good period of time, right? To kind of get a feel for how you both work. And again, don't forget, a lot of people work differently. A couple of my artists, one has sort of, ADHD, one's autistic. And again, you know, it takes a bit of getting used to, you know, just through organizations. You know, some people, you know, don't need you to speak to them every day. Some people just need to hear, you know, get on with it and once a month. So I think it's, you know, just working out what is expected of each person. The expectations is the biggest thing, I think. And I think some artists go into it, again, a bit like this call about, is expecting the day they sort of sign a manager to be getting gigs, to be getting in front of A&R and all this thing. And it's kind of a process as well. So I think for me, on the agreement side of things, I don't ask anyone to sign for 6 months. Once we've really kind of got into the crux of it, really sort of established a good relationship, and then I ask to sign. And then it will be for sort of, you know, the first period of two years, because we've kind of had 6 months working, it's 2 years. And then it's kind of, you know, renewable every year automatically, but with a sort of 3 or 6 month termination. And then the sunset clause goes on for like 10 years. And I think it's, you know, it can vary. I sort of say the first 5 years are the same amount, and then, you know, 5 years after is lesser. But I think, you know, really sort of 2 years is reasonable, I think, if you've had a few months of getting used to each other, and then it can be renewed annually.
Amazing. How do you find your artists?
Do you know what? I've been quite blessed with mine, to be honest. They're really quite good. So I actually found Thomas. So we actually were students at Point Blank Music School. So again, coming from the corporate world, I probably had I've had to work sort of 10 times harder than most people, I guess, and also being gay and all this other stuff and being older. I'm 47 now. So kind of trying to move into the music industry, there's been a few barriers that you kind of, you know, had to do. So to kind of, you know, give myself some sort of, you know, credence, I kind of did a Point Blank Music School, music management. So I met Thomas through that, actually. And then Ros Queen, she played at a gig I put on, and as soon as she started singing, I thought I had to work with her. And then just through being out and about at networking events and stuff as well, really. And so they've all been through friends of friends or contacted people I've known. I do get a few people reach out on Insta or by email, and I always still kind of have a conversation with them. But again, I think for me, it's, you know, it's being careful that you don't take on too many people. Again, because it's just me, you know, I think 4 artists is enough, especially when they're up and coming, because there is a lot more work to do on building their story and getting everything in place. Hopefully sort of next year, you know, we can take on someone, and then maybe we'll take on another 1 or 2. But I think in the up and coming space, again, because we do sort of work with people for a few months to see whether it's vibey, there's a couple of people we kind of just help out a bit now and give advice to once a month, you know, and maybe in a year's time, we'll be ready to take them on. But yeah, so far, all through word of mouth or friends or sort of, you know, gigs, but otherwise mainly people do reach out by email and Insta. And I think when you do try and reach out by email or Insta, I guess, you know, again, it's a difficult one because we all get so many emails nowadays, right? But I would kind of, you know, not go straight into the, you know, I've done this, I want to, you know, you to manage me. I'd kind of be a bit more, you know, tell me your story. I think we don't make enough of our story sometimes. You know, like, tell me if you know, what you're sort of looking for. I guess it's not just, I get so much music, and to be honest, I don't actually get to listen to that much music anymore, apart from in artist demos. But I would say just, you know, give it a bit more of a story in your opening line, you know, who you are, about you, because I think that's the most interesting part, because that's what, you know, you're going to vibe with or kind of, you know, instantly kind of get your attention, rather than just kind of, you know, sending links through or sending stuff through saying you need a manager. Kind of just open up, oh, look, I know you're a manager, so I'd reach out, your story, and then here's a link to something. And I think it just gives people a bit more, they can relate to it a bit more, and it's just more of it captures your eye a bit better.
Yeah, I love what you said, because this is one of the things with Amplify Her where I'm always like, I know as artists, you want to sing, you want to perform as many songs as you want, and I'm like, you don't need to. People, like, give them a taste, and then that's it, and then talk to them, because people want to know more about who you are than just listen to your music. And I know I'm an artist as well, background of an artist, so I know that this sounds like, what do you mean? Music is everything, but it's there's so much music out there that knowing you means so much more. So yeah.
I think you're completely right. I think it was like, it's 120,000 songs a week now or something like that. And I think, again, it's people, you know, it's people's energy. I think this is why it's, you know, when you meet someone, I mean, like Ros Queen, she walked into a room when we put on an unsigned night at Homegrown, and she walked in, and the moment she walked in the room, I was just like, who's this? Because she's in fashion, big blue wig. And And then as soon as you started talking to her, she was just full of fun and that's what kind of, and then I sort of already thought I wanted to work with her, and then she sung. And I think it's, I think in the creative space, people are, it's their energy and their story which give away so much more, because that's why they're writing music and that's how they're transferring their passion into it. So I think it's the biggest thing you can kind of use really in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I want to, so our theme today is about talking about expectations. So I want to bounce back into your experience of working with an artist and signing with an artist. So let's say they brought their socials up, not so high, but they're at a good number. They're pretty busy. They're doing their thing. They want to take their music to the next level. What would you say they should expect from a manager, and what we said they should not expect from a manager?
Well, listen, I heard a couple of you say you had nice hairdos. I'm actually losing my hair through the stress of some of it, but I'm definitely going grey. So I think, look, what to expect. I think it's where, as I say, I think for me, it's all about the music in a way, and this is where it is all about the music. And I think if you've got good music, I think remember that it's the manager that has to send it out to A&R and will kind of decide whether it's ready for release. So I think have your music. But also make sure that your manager isn't just sending it out in a way. Let them listen to it, let them give feedback, let them see if improvements. It's not to change your sound, but it's forever changing. And I think even when you look at the industry now, like a year ago, it was easier to get some of Thomas's tracks signed, whereas now record labels, two bits of information for you, record labels, big majors are struggling to sign acts now because they know so many people can go independent and the tools are there for them to do it. I think another thing is actually, you sit in A&R meetings with the big majors and they want wonky. They want something that takes them on a story and they're not expecting, because there's so much music out there, it's all the same. So I think the manager's job is to give you some of that information and make sure, give you that feedback so you can, you still want your sound, but you can just bear it in mind. Because again, it's hard for a manager when you just get rejected all the time as well. And you want them to do well. So it's a reflection on both of you, I think, and you both have to take pride in that. So I think it's making sure you've got the music. And then I guess, look, it's a bit about your and I guess, sorry, on the music is all, for me, as long as it's not tearing into music, all feedback is constructive in a way. There's no negativity. I think it's important to see that as well. It's easy for artists to get disheartened because they're not getting signed or they're not getting the numbers. I think also, when it comes to social media, people shouldn't be too concerned with the validation of numbers and figures either. Yes, it's nice to have 20,000, followers on Insta, but I have artists, friends who are artists, and their 20,000 followers don't engage with them at all on social media, so it's not important. And I think again, when you're releasing all the time independently, it's hard to get that validation of Spotify, these figures. So I think it's where, as long as your brand is there, it's making sure that you and your manager both see it and see that vision, and that if there's any changes that need to be done. So I think it's coming sort of, not as the full package, but coming sort of having that conversation is right. Well, is where I'm placed, and is where I want to be. Is that doable? Is that achievable? What do we need to tweak? What do we need to fix? And where the gaps are. Look, everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. Any business has the same. So I think it's just about having those honest conversations, being transparent, and really kind of, and again, just speaking by phone a lot. I think a lot of people try to do stuff by email and WhatsApp. And I think if you can't do in person because there's distance, just speaking by phone so that, email and WhatsApp isn't misinterpreted and all this stuff as well. So I think it's coming along and just making a plan, sort of saying what your plan is and being targeted to some respect. Look, having not unreasonable goals, but goals. What do we want to achieve this month? And sort of working out, where, and it changes every month as well, right? If you've had 1 month where you've gone and made 3 great songs, then the next month you might not make 3 great songs. So can you concentrate more on your social media? But I think it comes back to organization. And organization is, having that day a month in the calendar to work on your content, having that half a day to work on other things. If you're a DJ or SoundCloud, for example, and just kind of using that time wisely, I think, and making sure that you both can kind of catch up after that and the manager can fill up the gaps. I think, the expectation is, I think that, if you can get the manager to help you with all of these bits and really try and do all of that, then you've given them everything they need to then go and get in front of people. and really push you and speak to people and make the right noise, make sure that they can then, see what PR companies you should be working with, what they can do with the music you have. And I think it changes from genre to genre, right, as well, I think, which is the other thing we should flag. Acoustic, for example, I love acoustic music. And it's difficult sometimes. Acoustic music can sound quite same sometimes on the DSP. But if you hear someone again live, you get the whole, their energy, you get the whole presence, their persona, their vibe. And so it's important to try and get acoustic played more, or at least try and get you more fans so that actually you can sell tickets to live gigs, right? And if you're electronic, it is much more about SoundCloud for pushing DJ. So it's just working out what's best and what that pipeline is, and working towards that, I think.
Yeah. So my other question is, how many times do you speak to your artists? Because 5, that's a lot of.
Yeah. So do you know, they're all very different, actually. So I speak to, again, they can all kind of take care of themselves pretty much to some degree, or for shape or form or another. So I probably speak to 2 of them every day. And that will just be are you all right today? Do you need anything for one of them? And with another one who's got a bit more going on, it's touching base a lot more, just to make sure they don't go, they don't go off piece with anything, so to speak, in the sense that I think, they can kind of, again, if I get the creative space, I find sometimes you can get so bogged down in a song that you spend so much time in it, and time, and sometimes you have to pull them out and say, right, stop now, this is enough, let's kind of get it on. So and then others we probably speak like every other day, and one I just speak to once a week, because they're completely organized, and they're really on top of it. And all I find myself really doing for them is, telling them the sort of latest trends, telling them sort of feedback, making sure that we've kind of got the release schedule. Well, with them it's quite good, actually, because we're always working sort of 6 months ahead, whereas with the rest it's always probably what's happening sort of now, because that's the way they work. So I think, as I say, the majority of them sort of like at least every 2 or 3 days, and then the other rest probably just once or twice a week, depending on where they are. But I think always kind of making sure that I know where they are. I feel, as you know, time is not our friend, right? It's quite scary to think we're almost sort of 2/3 of the way through this year. So I think it's making sure that they try and switch their mindset. So for me, I'm always looking as to what we're going to be doing this time next year, because I think you should. And so I think with them, they're always just concentrating on what they're working on today and that demo they're working on today, which is great. But if you're working on that demo for every day for the next 3 months, month, then you're not getting anywhere. So I think that the biggest thing for me is consistency, and it's making sure that, TikTok will tell you this. It's not whether you post 7 times a week. If you're going to post 7 times a week, post 7 times a week. And if you're going to post once a week, post once a week. And I think it's the same with music, Again, we were speaking to a major the other week, and they actually, one of our band has only just done their first release, and they done loads of gigs. And he was like, look, we would rather them not release. And, as long as they've got a consistent, everyone just needs to have a consistent, sort of release schedule. So I think it's just making sure that they don't miss that, they don't drop the ball. And we do try and keep everything as consistent and moving as possible, which is the most important thing everyone can see. And I think, again, it comes back sometimes to validation of numbers. Electronic people always want their label to release on because they get streaming figures. And as I said to them, at the moment, it's not important for that. It's more important about their music being out there, because the more music they have out there, the more people can hear them, the more people can hear their sound, the more collaborations they may get, and that sort of stuff as well. So I think for me, it's just really, making sure we just never drop the ball. I'm like a glorified PA sometimes, basically.
What's the consistency? What's consistency? Like, how many? What would you say? Like 1 release every 3 months or more? 1 monthly? I know depending on the genre, probably. But
yeah, so kind of depends on the genre. But for all of my artists, I say sort of once every 8 weeks, really, around that ballpark. I think it's good to try and on the electronic side, we say one every month, just because it's easier to kind of push for that in a way. But I think generally across the board, one every 6 to 8 weeks. They say 6 weeks, but I think 6 to 8 weeks is more reasonable, and more sort of especially cost wise. By the time we've got it mixed and mastered and all these different things and done a bit of promo, but one every 6 to 8 weeks I think is reasonable for us across the board.
And so you promote every song every 6 to 8 weeks. Well,
yeah, we try to make sure they don't all release on the same Friday, which sometimes they want to do. Yes, we do. We tend to see what they want with each one. Again, for some of them, what we'll do is we'll hear the sound of the track depending on the genre and depending on the sort of the mood. If it's summer, for example, and it's acoustic, we'll try and get Max to do a bit more on TikTok and a bit more on socials. We'll try and make sure, again, I think an important thing to bear in mind, I think I've mentioned to the other Andrew when we spoke, is, the music industry is very much, it's kind of seasonal, like the world is as well. So you tend to find that when Ibiza opens in the end of April, May, and sort of festival season starts, you don't get anyone in the music industry now from around about now, they'll be coming back to work, I guess. And so literally you kind of lose them for that big chunk of time. And then again, probably you'll lose them mid-November until the end of January. So you've only kind of got these windows between sort of, January to April and sort of, September to November, where they're there to really listen to music or make things happen. So it's making sure, again, that it's always looking forward to the future. Right, what release do we want out next February now? Because we've only got another couple of months to get it to people. So I think it's, making sure that you really sort of hit that in a way. And yeah, and promotion wise, we'll try and use, I think, again, it's making sure I keep on top of that in a way as well. It's making sure the artists obviously are happy with who we're using and costs are agreed up front and all this different thing if there are costs. But again, you tend to find there's some great companies out there. I think PR is always quite difficult because PR is almost just as good as your black book of contacts that you have. There's some great sort of digital places out there. Again, I think they don't always last long, and that's not their fault, but it's because once someone knows someone is good, everyone starts going to use them and then they kind of get saturated. So I think it's constantly making sure that, there's someone current, that, someone that service hasn't dropped, that. And again, some of these places, you're only as good as the people that you were speaking to there. We had a really good guy at one place and he went off traveling, and then we could never get an answer on stuff, and the service really fell. So I think it's always just making sure that, it's a bit trial and error. It's a bit trial and error. Use someone on one release, see the results. If you're happy with it, maybe use them again. If it starts dropping off, switch to someone else straight away. But just sort of seeing the sound and what sort of suits with the budget and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's very good point. I've had this experience as well, where it works out a little bit and then it stops, and you're like, okay, consistency again on their side also. They do make a rod for their own back, some of them, when they're good. This is the thing, and it's kind of then they shoot themselves, or the costs fall out as well, and then it's just not reasonable. And I think, and it's a difficult one because everyone can kind of teach themselves how to use the Facebook ads and the Instagram ads and TikTok and Snapchat. But again, I think Snapchat, by the way, is a very good one nowadays sometimes for ads because it's cheaper. But the artists just don't always have time to do that, right? And it's, again, I think sometimes it's weighing up the cost, because a lot of them won't help you with the content. You've still got to make the content and deliver it to them for them to post it. So I think there's a couple of outfits which are quite good now who kind of almost help you with the content and sort of can get it all the right shapes and sizes, because I know it's always the different dimensions that don't help across the platforms. And so I have two more questions for you, and then I'll leave.
No, please do.
Have you ever not agreed with an artist's artistic direction? So sometimes as artists we tend to go on one side, do one song, and then the next song is a bit different, and we're kind of looking into trying this, trying that. Have you ever been like, no, don't do this? Or do you think a manager's place is also to direct in creativity world, or should the manager stay away and just let the artist do his thing?
It's a really difficult one, because I love creativity and I love hearing what everyone comes up with. But I think it's one where it depends on what you want to achieve. And I think that's, look, if you want to be on a major label, you kind of almost have to have the consistency and what they want to hear. I think if you are happy trial erroring again and sort of finding your sound, because again, I think it's a journey, and I think you must enjoy every part of the journey. I think let's rewind it, all of us should enjoy this, and it's great. So, but I think it's where I have had to a couple of times, only because maybe you've had this big banger on an electric sound, and then it's gone to very nicey pop. And again, it plays havoc with the algos and your sort of fan building and all that sort of stuff everywhere. But I think it's almost where, you can move too quickly sometimes. You almost still need to find your audience. And once you've got your audience, you can then take them on that journey with you a little bit more sometimes. So I think if it's going to be quite sporadic and eccentric and all over the place, it is difficult, and you do kind of have to step in a little bit. I think even if we've got, for example, Roz Queen does a lot of R&B soul, Afro jazz. and now she's sort of doing a lot of Afro beats and electronic music. And I think one of the, one of the main ones to point out is you tend to find a lot of artists will do put their vocal to electronic music because it's big. It's 25% of the UK charts now, and they're still doing their acoustic music. And obviously, again, labels don't always like to see that on their profile. But again, a simple one is just have 2 Spotify profiles and have 2 pseudonyms. I know it's double the work and it causes problems, but yeah, it's a difficult one for a manager. I think if you both agreed on the vision and you both need where you want to get to, and that's kind of set in stone, you have to kind of step in a little bit. And again, don't forget, I think it's not that the music will never come out. It's maybe just not the right timing. I think it's maybe a case of, hooking your fans, hooking people, and then sort of changing it further down the line. But yeah, as much as I can, I still let them explore a little bit anyway, right? Because I think it's important. You don't know what they're going to be good at. You don't know what's going to come out of it. And so it's kind of making sure that you don't, demand too much. And again, I think I would never say, I know a few managers who would say, don't work with so-and-so and don't do this. I think it's nice to still give them a little bit of free reign, because you just don't know what they're going to find out about themselves when they do it as well.
Yeah, I like that. My last question is for you, and then obviously, if anybody has questions, please get ready. We'll start opening the floor. I guess that's how they say it, right? So you have 5 artists right now. You've kind of taking this full time for a year now. What kind of are your goals in the next 5 to 10 years with your artists? Are you planning to sign more, or is it taking those 5 and bringing them? Where do you want to bring them? Yeah.
Well, I'd love to be retired somewhere hot, but no. So I think for me, do you know what? It's interesting because I think what I would like to do is I would never like to be a big house where you don't have I would like to grow it a little bit because I love the independent space. I think for me, the exciting bit is about meeting people, their story, like we go back to, and just the people I've met is just phenomenal, and the talent is just immense. And I think we forget about all the genres of music as well, gospel, all these different things that you've got is all music. So for me, what I would like to do is build, see these artists do well, get them to where they want to be. And yeah, expand a little bit, but I don't think ever have more than sort of, 12, 15 artists, just because I think it would always still be nice with my sort of, the founder to always at least have some form of interaction, even if you've got a couple of people who are responsible for them, to always know that, somebody can get hold of you if they need to, or they wanted a bit more from someone. So grow a little bit. But I think more importantly, give back. I think for me, it's, it's nice to be part of this, and I think I've enjoyed it and I love it and it's my passion. So I think it's where if our artists can do well and get to somewhere and have fans, make sure that we give back to other people and we sort of share our knowledge, and we do a bit of work for charity or causes that need it, and just shine the light a lot more as well, really, I think. And get up and coming artists to kind of come and tour with them. I think again you sort of hear of big bands, and not always, but some big bands, you have to pay to come and support them and be the support act. No, get some up and coming talent in there and give them a choice, give them sort of the chance as well. So I think, yeah, grow the business, but at the same time really sort of try and just help others do a bit like you've done, work with people like yourself and your community, and see how we can all sort of win and succeed in one go, because I think that's the brilliance of it all.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to say you have spoken so fast and given so much information. That's amazing.
Not too fast, I think. Sorry.
No. You were like boom, 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 boom. This is it. So, guys, I know there's a lot maybe to unravel, but yeah, does anybody have any questions? I'm gonna unmute. No? Do I see any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you share an example of a managerial failure of yours and what you learned from it?
I think probably some of it is, I guess one managerial failure is, though it were 2. There was one artist that I did sign with too quickly in a way as well, actually. I think we got a bit carried away. And I think that's one of the biggest things you can do, is because again, you sort of invest time and all this stuff. So I think it's just acting too quickly sometimes. I think, everyone wants to move quickly, the industry is moving quickly, but I think you just kind of have to, really just sometimes just take a step back from some things as well. They were a friend as well, actually, but I think you have to sometimes just remove the personal bit from it sometimes, as much as the personal bit is important, because we're all human beings and you need to be able to be friends and make sure they're all right and not suffering all this time, and, you know, be there in the hard times. I think you still have to remember that, you know, that's when it can be sort of, you know, mixed emotions. And I guess the other thing is as well is just a bit like I was alluding to before, is just making sure that, you know, we have to be the most organized out of the pair of us as well, right? Is where I did drop the ball a couple of times, maybe on different things, and, you know, or maybe just allowing artists to, you know, you sort of gave them the deadline of a week and 4 weeks later you're still waiting for them to give you something. I think those sort of failures, just because, you know, that's when, you know, that time has elapsed, does cause problems. You know, it's embarrassing for me if I'm waiting to get something to A&R, and a big major A&R and stuff as well. So I think it's maybe being a bit too soft and not being too kind of, no, I need it, and a bit cutthroat, but not in a nasty way. Just where, you know, it's the same as if you're at university or a business, right? If people want something, you need to kind of, and I think that's where it's just finding that, right, I'm a friend and I'm trying to be nice, but at the same time, no, come on, this is serious and it's needed. So I guess that can be a failure, I think, from my perspective. But I think what I do try and do is, I guess, you know, maybe I shouldn't, but I think it's just so important to, you know, that you have to worry about the artists and their music. You have to believe in them as much as you do, right? Because it's a win-win for both of us, and you are both in it together, and it represents both ways. And I think that's where, when you do that, it becomes difficult to draw the line sometimes.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
My artist may say there's a few more, by the way, but not that I know of anyway.
Anybody else has any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Laurel.
Hi. I was curious about, in relation to when you're putting out music with distribution rights and general rights for your artists, what steps do you take to protect them, to make sure they're protected?
Okay, so when it comes to distribution rights, then you just mean sort of their release music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So obviously we tend to use a lot of labels, obviously, or we use Horus or Music Gateway, just when we distribute stuff. What we do is we make sure that all their stuff, again, and this is quite a big task. I know that admin side of PRS, PPL, and all the other things can be quite daunting as well if they don't know how to do it. So we make sure that once that's all in place, I've got a little checklist as well. I've got a spreadsheet. I know it's a bit geeky of me and maybe a bit business-like, but we've got a little Google Doc where we just kind of each release, we know exactly what we need when they're releasing it, images, lyrics, all the different IDs for artists, DSPs, etc. And then we make sure once it's released, we've kind of checked everywhere, checked that it's come out correctly, checked that it's linked everywhere correctly, checked that they've gone into PPL. I've got access to it as well. You can get your manager to have access to your account on these things, and just check that it's all in the right place. And I think that's where it's almost my responsibility to do that as well, to a degree, purely because actually, look, when it comes to money coming in, I need to make sure that we get their money coming in. And when you see some of what the radio play, we also make sure they upload everything to BBC Introducing in the UK, because obviously that can be a good chance to get stuff played. And actually, when you see the sort of money that comes from a stream on some of these things, a 3-minute song I think on BBC Two is like £14 stream. You know, so it's a little money maker. So I make sure that we've got everything in place through the distributors or Horus and stuff as well. Once it's released, we do a quick sort of sanity check of everything, and then when it's synced, we use a couple of platforms to put stuff through and just make sure that everything again is all the meta tags are correct and all that stuff as well. And just keep I think just keep a log, a spreadsheet of all their catalogue, because one thing again that is important is when you get to that size where you have 20 songs or 30 songs, it's then difficult to go back in time and a bit of a task. And you know what these tasks are like, you always put them off. So we tend to, as we go along, make sure we've just got a spreadsheet of who wrote the song, who's got the credits, you know, who's got the master, who's got the publishing. Just because, you know, at some point in time, there is going to be somebody who's going to want to see this and you know, work out what royalties you're due off it and all this stuff as well, or what they're going to pay. So I think it's the boring bit, isn't it? It's the admin bit, the organisation bit, and that sort of double check.
Thank you.
You, oh, sorry, Aruna? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I was just going to ask, as a music manager, what would you say is like the most important thing that you look for in artists? Because I know you mentioned like the story and the brand. So would you say that's even more important in a way than things like socials or PR or like your music and stuff? Is that more what?
Yeah, do you know? So I think it is really. I think it's their music in them, I guess, really. And I think even if their music isn't quite there, you know, if they've got the knowledge, they know what they want to do. Look, you know, especially when you get some younger guys as well. I mean, Thomas was, so Thomas obviously taught himself keys when he was 12, went to university in Doncaster. They told him he'd never get anywhere with music. He'd never be a Calvin Harris, just forget it, and all these kind of things. So he got himself a scholarship to Point Blank Music School. And actually, look, his production from 2 years ago is so different from now. You kind of look back, and again, it's great watching that journey. And, you know, people are quite hard on themselves, but I think, you know, he wanted to take songs down from Spotify, and I was like, don't take stuff down, because you need to look back at where you came from and all that stuff as well. But I think it's them, and if they've got that passion, they've got that energy, they've got that drive, they've got that want, you know, and you can't make that in people, you know. So I think as long as you've got that and your music you've got music, then, you know, that can still come along. You can still progress. You still are learning. The more people you meet, and the more you do it, the better it's going to be. So I think the music doesn't need to be 100%. It's kind of them that needs to be sort of, you know, 90%. I think the socials and the PR doesn't really concern me too much in a way, because, you know, that kind of comes next. You know, you kind of get the music, and then you can kind of work on the rest. And again, look, when it comes to socials, it's about you finding your comfort zone as well, right? We're not all comfortable in front of a camera. Fair enough, I'm on the camera with you guys, but we're not all comfortable. And again, you've got a lot of big influencers on TikTok now, or people that are teaching people drum kits and keys where they don't even show their face. So I think it's about, you know, getting your music, getting that part, and then, you know, finding the socials artists. And the socials can be the sort of latter part. I know a lot of people concentrate on it, but yeah, as long as you've got that drive, really, you kind of, you know, you click with that passion. For me is the biggest thing, I think.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question in terms of money wise. So you talked about taking 20 as a manager, taking 20 to 25%. Are we talking about everything? Are we talking about live performance? We're talking about live streaming. We're talking about every single thing that the artist put out, or is it just certain aspects?
Yeah, so it's so I think again, it's interesting when you talk about money, isn't it? Especially with some older music managers that are out there and stuff. So it's 20-25%. Look, I think it's a partnership, okay, to and so for some artists, they're younger, you know, there's not much money in streaming, there's not that many live gigs. So what we do is we've got an agreement, you know, whatever it is, 20%. I think 25% is a bit too much for me, but actually it's 20% on streaming, merchandise, tickets, this stuff. When I say tickets, actually, what you tend to find is tickets can be a little bit more in agreement. So it can be 25% sometimes, and that's when it's based on either the net or the gross of the income, etc. as well. Again, what I tend to find is, you know, and I guess we're all different, but I sort of play it by ear. So for example, you know, if Ros Queen, who's still a student, for example, is going to get £100 at a gig, you know, in a pub somewhere, am I really going to take 20% of her, £20 of her? You know, there's that argument that yes, I probably should, to get her used to it. But at the same time, I'd rather have that £20 in her pocket to run some ads on or do stuff with. So I think everyone's very different. I like to think I'm quite honest and fair, but then again, if she's got a bigger gig that I've kind of had some doing and it's a bit more, then we do kind of do it just so there's a bit in the pot. Because again, for me, you know, I do kind of like to reinvest a bit back into what we're doing is an overall Orean. So it's important that we do stuff and we find a way to PR as well. But yeah, you'll tend to find there's the fee on streaming, merchandise. There'll be a slightly higher fee generally for live stuff. Again, it can be gross or net. Again, you know, that for me, it's important to always, and I would say this, and not everyone may agree with it, but, you know, to have just a clause in that protects both the artist and the manager and say, look, this can be reviewed as time goes on, you know, if when the artist is hopefully selling out, you know, Wembley, is it still fair to have that figure there? Probably not. So I think, you know, don't forget that you could always, one thing you can always do in these agreements to appease both sides is just say, you know, reviewable on an annual basis. And that kind of gives each of you protection in a way, to be honest. And then again, you've got that sunset clause where, you know, up to 10 years after you leave, it could be the full 20%, and I think that would be unfair. But, you know, I think for 5 years and then another 5 years reduced. And then what you tend to find is that there are 360 agreements, and 360 agreements are to cover everything. So if they were to get, you know, an acting job, if they were to do various different things, or, you know, they're an athlete, it would basically be their manager for every part of that, which there is as well. And again, so yeah, it's on all income in a way.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's important for everybody. I know money is such a hard topic, but when we talk about it, the less secretive it gets and the easier it gets to kind of see what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, and I know you're completely correct. Listen, especially I come from the corporate world, and I think when you're an up and coming artist, that's why it's it's decent to be fair. I think and yeah, look, we are sat here working, and honestly, like there's been many nights every time there's a release, I'm up at midnight until 3 or 4 in the morning on a Friday to work on this new release, right? But I think again, it's just working out. I would say just make sure there's simple things on the agreement you can do. Which is fair for both ways, and I don't think anyone would have a problem is, and that is just to say, look, reviewable annually. Also, actually, look, if I only do a gig for X amount, then why should I pay on that when I'm up and coming? Just little things that kind of make sense, really. I think a lot of it is just common sense, but again, it's the one that can cause the fallouts or the most animosity if you don't get it right in that agreement.
Yeah, very, very true. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question. Can you please give any advice on identifying your listener, your fans? Like, what is your target audience, right? If you have mixed genres, for example, how do you create a buyer's persona for this thing? How do you do it professionally?
So, okay, so that's an interesting one. So I think, once you've started getting quite a lot of music out, actually the easiest way is to look at Spotify for artists, I guess, to some degree. And also then if you started building your sort of like socials, then obviously you can look at some of the information that's available on all of those, I guess. But I think it's also important maybe to kind of for artists to kind of almost recognize their kind of peers in that space a little bit as well, or who they are the same as, or who they want to be the same as in those genres. Because again, I think, look, very quickly, just to go off slightly on a tangent before I come back, it's an interesting one, because when you do a Spotify pitch, for example, when you pitch to all the DSPs, there's two things. Managers can also have a separate pitch form to Deezer, Amazon and Apple and all of those guys for you that they also pitch for. But secondly, your Spotify pitch should probably obviously give that snippet of story of your song. It should probably tell Spotify which editorial playlist you should be on. And it should probably, almost identify to Spotify that you've identified what your sound is and who you should be in a way. So you're kind of spoon feeding them. You probably may already know that, but it just kind of helps, and it ties into this question a bit, because I think it's about knowing who you're kind of looking at who's current, and then from there kind of seeing who their fans are, be it through social media or be it through sort of the other stuff, what playlist it's on and that stuff as well. I guess if you are releasing on and that's how you sort of can then obviously identify through the social media ads or other stuff and the sort of the blogs you should be on and all this other stuff that you can kind of work with to do all of that. So I guess it's kind of working out other fans of other artists, and then that then helps you work out where else it should go and who you can work with them. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So. But do you have any tips, like
what's your genre, or what genre?
Well, that's an interesting question. Pop alternative, was this how you? This also another question. Well, how do you identify your genres? That's probably.
What do you do? It's tough, because I think in house music there's about 90 bloody genres at the moment.
Yeah, I was basically pitching for Spotify kind of a year ago, something for the playlist, and I was chosen by them. But like, it was so difficult to identify your genre, just like myriads of them. And like, when people start asking this kind of questions, what do we do as artists? Should we just invent our own genre? Just to, I don't know, sensual minimalism or something like that,
No, it's a really good. I mean, it's really true. I would say, obviously, you are kind of stuck within the remits to a degree of what they give you, because obviously that helps them and points in the right direction.
Yeah, true.
And obviously it helps a lot of blogs. However, at the same time, I also go back to this point that I think it's quite interesting. If just the genre you just mentioned there as an example, what wouldn't be interesting about a blog or someone getting, you saying, oh, I'm this genre that they've never probably heard of before that isn't you. It probably kind of is more eye-catching, more kind of, oh, I want to listen to this to see what this is, and this is new. So I think it's where it's kind of almost playing that game or ticking the box when it comes to DSPs and those sort of people where it's already set in stone because they need it for their computer. But then I guess, look, maybe it is more interesting for you to have that kind of, self-identifiable genre to maybe, go out and reach out to people to get their interest or to tickle their interest. I guess it's also maybe, finding out a bit about where you would play that gig-wise as well, in a sense, because if you can find out where you play that gig-wise, you can sort of maybe see some of the kind of fans that goes to places and that stuff as well. Why it's other people, and again, that's probably a very East London kind of vibe as well, to some degree, right? So actually, you've got your Jaguar Shoes, which plays some great little events and does loads of stuff down there. Jaguar Shoes, just in Shoreditch there. Jaguar Shoes Dream Handbags, I think it's called. But there's like that crowd where actually they'd be quite into it. Again, I think a friend of mine, Leo, she's genre bipolar pop. Okay, which is kind of the new genre, and that's what she identifies her music as, and it kind of stands out. She's doing quite well independently, so I think don't be scared to use your own. Just I guess when it comes to that sort of corporate world, toe the line of it, I guess, and have that.
Thank you. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
It's quite cool to have your own. Actually, you put yourself in your own box there.
Yeah. You have to create your own genres, so it stands out. Yeah.
So I think I do. Just thinking back to you, LLEO, she's doing quite well. She's on Insta and Spotify, but again, she's bipolar pop. So go for it.
Bipolar pop sounds just like phenomenal. It's just I want to listen to that kind of music just from this kind of phrase. Right, like what is this?
Well, I think alternative's back at the moment as well. I mean, this is another thing we all forget. It's like, say, you go through all these. It's constantly changing all the time. So I think when it comes to sort of indie alternative, it's kind of back in flavour a little bit because people are getting more excited by some of the smaller festivals and some of that stuff going on. The sort of blog world is more picking up a lot more. So I think it's definitely time to jump on stuff like that as well. And I think the support's there for it. I think because of diversity and because of different sort of moods and stuff, I think it's quite current in a way, in a good way.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot more support up and coming for it as well, I think.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amazing. I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
That been an hour already. That was good.
Oh,
doesn't feel like
like race through. I mean, and I'm like, go. You were how can we support you as well? Like, I know you have your own website, you have your own company. Is there anything? Are you having shows coming up? Any artists we can come and listen to? How do we support you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, listen, it's Orean, Orean music. So do feel free. Our socials are probably a little bit behind, by the way. But feel free to follow us. I mean, what I'll do is I'll keep you involved in the loop if we do have any more gigs. I think we should hopefully have a few more, probably coming up towards Christmas. But I mean, look, just keep in touch. Obviously, feel free to send out my email if you want as well. And if anyone wants a bit of advice, I'm happy to give advice every now and then. I enjoy it. It's good. It's fun.
Amazing. So
and I'll come to your next Amplify event as well, but I won't obviously be able to see everyone that is in the UK.
You have to come to the 25th of October. That's the next thing.
Right, I'll put that in the diary now.
There you go. And if you guys need any info as well, just let me know and I'll direct you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.